I think we are ready to go. I'm gonna just vamp here for a second while the other thing catches up, but it should be good to go. Yeah, so whenever you're ready, Jessica, I am ready.
It still says this live event will begin in a few moments.
It takes about 40 seconds usually to catch up to itself.
Okay.
So let's just make sure. Oh, technology. And again, if it starts, you'll probably need to pause it in your window because they're... All right, I see myself on there, so I think we're good to go.
All right, well, welcome, whoever's here. I'm going to let Lacy introduce herself and talk about everything that she is wonderful at. But I'm glad that there are people here today who are interested in content planning. I'm so interested in the content of this webinar, especially because I am so bad at organizing my own content calendar and staying on top of it. Yes, business planner that I am a disaster when it comes to blog planning. So I'm so excited when Lacy approached me and said she wanted to do this webinar for you. I will be taking copious notes, and I hope you do too. So I'll just turn it over to her and we'll get going.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm excited to be here with you and your audience too. And just a few little technical notes before we jump in. There is a chat box right underneath the video if you're watching this live. So if you can see and hear us, please do go ahead and pop a little note in there, a smiley face, let us know. Jessica's going to be watching those comments for me while I'm presenting. And so if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and pop them in the chat box and I'll answer them along the way. And I know Jessica said she had a few questions too, so maybe we'll talk about those and answer those as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to get started. So just to introduce myself, hi, I'm Lacy. I'm at lacyboggs.com and I run the Content Direction Agency. And what we do is we help small business owners strategically plan their content marketing and specifically their blogging. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about blogging with an editorial calendar and why you need one and how to put one together. The other little technical note is you should have gotten a link for the editorial calendar template in your email. If you need it, it is also in the chat box below. So go ahead and grab that if you want it, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen and get started here. Alrighty. So we're just going to hop on back here to the beginning and get started. So Jessica, if anything comes up or if you have any questions, go ahead and interrupt me because I can't see that chat box anymore, but we'll go ahead and get started. So today's presentation is called the 5 W's of your blog's editorial calendar, and we're going to talk about how to put one together in a strategic and thoughtful way so that you can really make sure you're making the most of your blogging time, because I know that it's extremely time consuming to create all that content, and it can be very confusing wondering what you should be posting and when and why. So that's what we're going to go over a little bit today. So a little bit about me. I started out this business as a ghost blogger, and what that means is that I blog for other people's small businesses. That's how I started. It's a one-on-one service, and I still work for about 6 fantastic clients. And you know, as I've gone along and gotten bigger in my business, my clients have gotten bigger. And even the 6- and 7-figure-a-year businesses I write for, I found that a lot of times they didn't have a really clear, concise content strategy, which was really crazy to me because I came from the journalism world, and you know, all your favorite glossy magazines and newspapers have what they call an editorial calendar, and so they have planned out months and months in advance what they're going to be talking about and when and why and so on. And you know, your favorite glossy magazine is shooting Christmas photos in July because they're working as much as 6 months out with their editorial calendar. So as a journalist, it was a vital tool for my business and in my job. And when I switched over to blogging, it was like, well, how come you guys don't have a calendar? Where's your plan? What do you mean you just write about whatever you want to write about every week? It was kind of weird to me coming from that other world. And so I started developing my own process, strategy, and tools to help my clients. And as I continued doing that, I realized that there was a big gap out there in the internet world. Nobody was teaching this. Nobody was teaching how to be strategic about your blogging. And so it was something that I started blogging about on my own blog, and then just realized that there were a lot of people who, for whatever reason, for lots of different reasons, didn't choose to hire a ghostwriter for their blog. Maybe they couldn't afford it, maybe they just didn't choose to. And so I realized there was a hole in the marketplace there where I could teach small business owners and entrepreneurs and startups how to use their content strategically. So today we are going to talk about editorial calendars, and as I mentioned, you should have gotten a link to this template in your email, and if not, I popped it in the chat box before we got started, so you can go and grab it. It is a Google Doc, and all you have to do is save a copy. You can save it as another Google Sheets spreadsheet or as an Excel to your computer. And then once you've saved it, you can edit it and change it and do everything to it. But I will also have screenshots up here, so you don't have to grab it right now. But this is where all the magic happens. And so as you can see, it's got a lot of different columns and a lot of different parts to it. And so that's what we're going to go over today, is all these different moving parts and what they mean and how to put it together for yourself. But first, I want to answer the question that probably a lot of you have on your mind, which is, why do I need an editorial calendar? You know, I'm not a big fancy magazine. I don't need to be shooting Christmas photos 6 months in advance. And I was reading some of Jessica's blog posts a little bit before I came on today, and she was talking about the importance of putting together a budget for your small business. And it occurred to me that you know, your editorial calendar, your content plan, is like a budget for your blog. It helps you plan out your content so that you know exactly what you're going to produce at any given time. You know where your resources need to be allocated, and by resources I mean time as a big one, but also, like, do you need to outsource certain things? Do you need to advertise certain things? Are there actual monetary outlays you need to put together, like for graphics or editing or social media help, things like that? So this really is very similar to putting together a budget or a business plan or something along those lines for your content. And I will show you how as we go on. So what we're going to cover today is the 5 W's of content planning: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and sometimes how, right? And if you went to elementary school, you probably heard these questions. We were all taught when we were writing reports back in, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, to ask these questions. And of course, being a journalist, these are near and dear to my heart. These are the questions you always want to ask about a story, but it's also the questions you want to ask about your content. We are going to do them in a little bit different order today. So we're going to do them, start with why. Then we'll talk about your who. We'll talk about your when. That's when you post. We'll talk about your where you're going to promote. And finally, we'll talk about what you're going to write about and how you put it all together. So I'm going to dive right in. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one quick interruption. I don't think your slides are progressing. I'm still seeing the very first slide of your presentation.
No. Oh, no. Okay. What do you see now? Do you see my PowerPoint screen?
Yeah, now I'm seeing the 5 W's.
Okay, well then I tell you what, I'm just going to make this big. Can you see it now still?
Yep, I think yeah, that looks a lot better, thanks.
Cool, no problem, we'll just go from here. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so just dive right in here to the why. So we're going to start out with knowing your why. And what I normally like to say to people is there's actually 2 whys for your business blog. The first is, why are you producing this content for your readers? Readers generally come to a blog for one of 3 reasons. They come to be educated, they come to be entertained, or they come to be informed. And so Inspired is the third one. Educated, entertained, or inspired. And you can think about some of your favorite bloggers, and probably they fall into one, possibly two of these categories. For inspiration, I like to think of Leo Babauta at Zen Habits, or maybe Seth Godin is very inspirational. Daniel Laporte is very inspirational. For entertaining, I always think of like the Blogess or Deuce, where you just go because they're hilarious and you want to read about taxidermy and craziness. And education is generally your business blogs are generally about education. You're either educating people on the problem you solve, or helping them solve that problem a little bit, with how-to posts, that kind of thing. You might also be a little bit inspiring or entertaining, but generally business blogs tend to fall into that educational category more often than not. So that's your first why. You got to know why your readers are coming to you. Why do they want to read your content in the first place? Your second why is, why are you blogging for your business? So what do you hope to get out of it? And I know that a lot of people, they hear business gurus or online marketing gurus and they say, you have to have a blog, you have to have a blog. But they don't know why. They just know that they're supposed to be blogging. They don't know what they're supposed to get out of it. So I really want everyone to be very clear on what they hope to get out of their blog. Do you want to grow your list? Do you want to sell a product through your blog? Do you want to just create a community around your blog? Do you want to, I'm blanking, but there are lots of reasons why you might want to blog for your business. They don't all have to do with selling necessarily. A lot of times your blog is a lot earlier in your sales funnel than the actual selling stage. But you need to be very clear on what you hope to get out of your blog. So on our spreadsheet, what we have here is, I'm going to see if I can make this just a little bigger. There we go. That looks better. You have two different why categories. You'll see one says why category and one says AIDA why, and I'll explain that one in a second. But basically, you want to make note as you're planning each piece of content, what is your big why behind this content? So what I've done here is I have a column for categories. So on my business, I have several different categories that I rotate through with my blog posts. I might talk about blogging 101. I might talk about your editorial calendar. I might talk about writing voice sometimes. I might talk about advanced blogging. So I want to know where I'm at with those categories. What's the why there? What am I teaching? What am I putting out there? The other part of the why is, what am I going to get back? And so that's what the AIDA sequence is about. It's about leading people down a path to purchase or take some sort of action. Usually on my blog, the action I want them to take is opting in, getting on my email list. So I work in a strategic formula where I work backwards from a launch date and get them to, and walk them down a path to take that action, which I'll explain more about in a minute. But that's what that second why is. You can use that column for different things. Different people have different formulas, that they use for stretching out their blog sequences, their content sequences. You might also just use it to say, okay, this one's a post that I want to get opt-ins. This one's a post where I'm going to ask for the sale. This one's a post where, whatever the action is, whatever reason you're posting it, you want to put that in that second why column. I find this is very helpful, and sometimes people get really, really sort of big aha moments when they go through this why process. Why am I really blogging? This was one of my clients, the lovely Sonia Singh, and she's a life coach. And she wanted her blog to be inspiring and motivating first. So she wanted to be in that inspiration category. And she had been very confused about how to do that. She was kind of blogging her personal stories and things she was going on, but she kept thinking she had to have some kind of how-to in there, and it got very confusing for her. She didn't know what to do. So once she got very clear on what she wanted people to take away from it, which was inspiration, and then also what she wanted to get back from it on her own, she could more easily decide what to write about. She could say, okay, I know this personal story will be really good because it's going to be very inspiring for people, and then I know I want people to sign up, so I'm going to put this call to action at the end. I hope that makes sense. Just hop in here if you have any questions or if anybody has any questions. But that is our first one. That's your why, knowing your why. So the second one is the who. And this is sometimes the number one mistake I see small business owners making when they start a blog, is that they're actually blogging to the wrong audience. You've probably often heard that old adage that you should write what you know. And so that's where a lot of small business bloggers start. They write about what they know, which is their business. But a lot of times that will actually attract the wrong audience. And this actually happened with my business, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But a really great example of this that I've seen in the past is, say you're a photographer. Say you are like a wedding photographer, and somebody's told you should write what you know for your blog. So you get on your blog and you start talking about lenses and cameras and lighting setups and your kit and all this sort of thing. And you start getting some comments and you start getting some traction and people are sharing your post. But then you realize it's all other photographers that are talking about and commenting on and sharing your posts. And they are not the brides who are going to hire you. What's happened is you've been blogging to the wrong audience, right? So you've been writing about what you know, but you haven't been couching it in the terms and talking about the things that your ideal customer really wants to know about. So we have to get really clear on who we're writing to at any given time. And one thing I like to point out here is that your ideal reader might be slightly different than your ideal customer, because your ideal reader is a little earlier in the process a lot of times. They're maybe not quite ready to purchase yet. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about who your ideal reader for your blog might be. So again, in our spreadsheet here, I have a who column. And some people may or may not need this column. If you only have one kind of reader and one kind of customer, you may not need this column. But a lot of people have different ideal customers that they're talking to. So when I first stopped being a journalist, my first business was running a food blog. And when I started it, I assumed it would be for people like me, that it would be for young moms, busy moms, trying to feed their family healthy on a budget with no time. And so that's who I was writing to. But as I got going, I realized that I was attracting a couple of other audiences as well. I was attracting college kids that wanted to eat healthy on a budget, and also empty nesters who maybe had some kind of health problem and they were ready to get healthy and were trying to do it on a fixed income. So all of a sudden, as I learned more about who my readers actually were, as opposed to who I thought they were, suddenly there were two whole new audiences that I could write specifically to if I chose to. I could write to those college kids about how to cook in the dorm. I could write to the empty nesters about how to find good recipes for just 2 people or things like that. So if you do have multiple audiences, this who column can really help you focus, but it can also help you make sure that you're speaking to those customers regularly. So like you don't want to ignore a whole part of your customer base by never writing a blog post that appeals to them. This also works with people who are at different stages of learning in your process. Maybe you have people who are total beginners versus people who are a little more advanced versus people who are very advanced. So you could write blog posts to people at different points in their business or their whatever they're doing, their problem that you solved. So that's a good thing to keep in mind for some people. All right, so we've done who, we've done why. Now we're on to when. And so this is really where, obviously, it's a calendar. This is probably what you thought you were going to be hearing about when you heard editorial calendar, but it's about planning when you're going to write your posts. But it's a little more complicated than just saying, okay, I'm going to post every Monday, or I'm going to write, once a week, every Tuesday and Thursday, once every 2 weeks, whatever it is. And it's also a little more in-depth than saying I'm going to write about this thing on this date. What you really want to be doing is considering when do your readers need to hear a particular message. And what I mean by that is to consider your sales cycles. So if you know you're launching something, then you probably want to spend, maybe if you blog once a week, maybe 4 to 6 weeks ahead of that launch, priming people to be excited about it and be ready to buy, so that when you open that shopping cart, they are psyched and excited to buy from you. Do people say psyched anymore? Psyched and excited to buy from you. So, so what I like to do is actually work backwards from my launch dates, my sales cycles, or major events in the calendar. So if you look at the very first column in the template, it says major events. And so I filled it out for some holidays that might be happening. If you have an evergreen product or service that's always available, you're still going to have sales cycles. You know, if you're selling something that is a great Valentine's Day present, or Easter, or Mother's Day, I'm trying to think what's coming up, you know, spring break, then you really definitely want to work backwards from those holidays, even if you have an evergreen product that's not technically launching. So that's what that first column is for. You can put your sales, your launch dates, holidays, anything that's pertinent to how you sell your business or sell your product. Devin, I can hear you. The second column there is the when, so that's the actual date. And so you can see this is set up for someone who's blogging once a week. So you want to make sure that you put in your actual dates. You can do it two ways: the date you want to have it finished written, or the date you actually publish. Either way, it's a deadline for you. You understand what's going on, and you can work backwards. So you can see there about midway down the page, it says a big sale. That way I know that if I'm having a sale on that date, then I want to plan my content and work backwards from there, so that 6 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of that, I'm starting to talking about that sale. I'm starting to start talking about that product, so that people are primed and ready to buy. And this is why I developed this system, because I was discovering that this was the thing that nobody was talking about. So this is my friend Sarah Greer, who's an accomplished copywriter. But when she went through my Blogstorm program where I teach this, she was saying, like, this was a totally different way of looking at my content. You know, she's an accomplished writer. She writes all sorts of content for other businesses, and she had never thought about it this way, in this working backwards way. I think this is kind of revolutionary for a lot of people, because they just have never thought about it quite that way, that they know what's coming up and they can work backwards from those dates or those sales or those holidays, whatever it might be, and plan content that will really support what they want to do with their business. It goes back to that why. Why is your blog? Why are you blogging? To support your business? This is it, right? We want to support your sales and your promotion. So understanding how that when can really help you work backwards and create content that truly supports what you want to do with your business is pretty much the key takeaway from today. So if you only take one thing away, that would be it. Okay, so we've done your why, we've done your who, we've done your when. Now we're going to talk about where. So I often find that people have what I like to call the field of dreams problem when it comes to their blog. They think, if I write it, they will come. And that might have been true, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even, when there weren't as many blogs. Nowadays, we are creating so much content, the collective we are creating so much content that your blog post, your tweet, your Facebook post is lost almost as soon as you post it. So you have to have some kind of promotion plan in place if you want to get any traction with your blog posts. So where is all about where are you going to promote your content. And there's a very, I guess it's famous adage that, you know, it's the Pareto principle that 80% of your results come from 20% of your time, or whatever it is. But the way it applies to blogging is that if you spend 20% of your time writing, the other 80% of your time should probably be spent promoting. If you've got a post that's super important and going to support your business, you need to take the time to promote it. And so it's just about creating a promotional plan for each and every post. Personally, I have a few things that I do for every single post. So I always share it to Facebook, I always share it to Twitter, so on and so forth. But depending on what the post is about, I may have additional things that I do because it might resonate with a particular audience. So in this example on the screen here, I wrote a post about work-life balance. And so it was very key to mamas who run businesses, mama CEOs. And I belong to a couple of mama CEO Facebook groups. So it was a perfect place to share and promote that blog post a little more with an audience that I knew would resonate with it directly. So I have your where column there, your promotional strategy. This could be anything. So it could be that you're going to email an influencer. It could be that you're going to post it to a particular group, or that you're going to use this one and post it to Medium or wherever you might cross-post or syndicate your content. I also threw in there a column for Facebook copy and Twitter copy. Those are totally optional, but if you like to go ahead and write those ahead of time, that's a nice place to keep it. It also helps if you're working with a team, a virtual assistant who might be helping you schedule your social media, things like that. So it just shows you that this is a very flexible template. You could add, if you're on Pinterest, if you're on Instagram, whatever it might be, you add what you need there, but that's just an example of how you might use those additional spaces to help come up with some more promotional strategies, questions, blurbs, whatever you need to put in there.
Can I jump in for just a second?
Please do.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of add to that. I think it's wonderful, and I think this is a piece of organization that I'm probably missing too when I'm creating content calendars. But one of the things I did to that maybe supplement this as well is I actually wrote a specific process for, so not just where I'm going to post it or who I'm going to, which influencer I might reach out to, but the actual steps involved with doing that, even if they're just as simple as like open your email and use this copy to write this email to this influencer. And so if you are working with somebody, it makes it a lot easier to transfer the actual process of doing the sharing to another person.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And actually, I have the same thing. I use Asana, and so I have a checklist I copy every single week that has a list of the groups that I always post to. We're all in Facebook groups that have like a weekly, share this now kind of thing. So I have my list of, okay, on Monday I post in this group, and on Tuesday I post in this group. And mostly I use this where column on the spreadsheet for additional things like above and beyond my normal. So this is just kind of a place where I can jot down a few notes like, oh, so-and-so would be really interested in this and might share it for me, kind of thing like that. But that's a really great point, Jessica. Thank you. Okay, so our next W is what, as in what the flying zucchini am I supposed to blog about, right? Hopefully by this point, you're kind of seeing how understanding the other W's help you figure out what you're going to blog about. So if you know, for example, that you have a launch coming up and you're working 6 or 8 weeks out in advance, you can look at your calendar and say, okay, well, I need to be talking about this topic that has to do with my launch for these 6 weeks. And so that can help you narrow it down. If you have certain categories, back at the beginning where I was talking about your why, if you have certain categories you talk about, if you haven't been hitting one very often, okay, throw that one in there. I need to say something about this. If you have multiple audiences, if I want to talk to my college students or my empty nesters instead of just my moms, that might help inspire some more ideas of what I might write about. So hopefully actually having that organizational piece in hand makes generating those content ideas a little bit easier. And you'll notice on the template that the second tab of the spreadsheet is called Idea Bank. And so I like to keep a running list of all my ideas, all my brilliant and not so brilliant ideas that occur to me all over the place in that tab. So I have them all in one spot. And I also like to put in my 2 why columns. So my 2 whys were my category and then my AIDA cycle. So that when I am faced with, okay, I have a spot in my calendar I need to fill, it needs to be about blog storming and it needs to be an interest post, I can go in and sort my list and come up with ones that I've already tagged as blog storming and interest or whatever it might be, and see the ideas I've already had. And that helps me fill in those blanks much, much more easily. When you kind of have some preset categories like that, that way you can sort your ideas and kind of see where you need to slot them in. If I was doing it for my food blog, I might have, recipe ideas and tip ideas, or I might have tips for moms, tips for college kids, tips for empty nesters, and so on, so that I could sort the whole list and find what I needed when I need it. That way, I almost always have this open on my computer constantly, so that when those ideas strike, I just type them in really quickly. As you can see, I also sometimes will put a link to an article that inspired me that I'd like to write something about. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a fully fledged, here's a blog topic with a title and, it's all ready to go. It could be just a very, very easy idea that I throw in there that maybe never goes somewhere, maybe does. I've had ideas in there that have been in there for years and I finally get around to writing them. So it's good to just have one spot to collect all those ideas to use when you're doing active brainstorming and things like that. And again, because I'm a little type A, I organize it all with the categories and stuff. So if you do have questions about how to come up with these kinds of ideas, how to put them together into a formula, how to, really strategize your content marketing so that your blog and all of your content is supporting your sales process, then what I have is my Blogstorm course, which is a natural extension of what I'm teaching here. It goes into a lot more detail about, first we start with how to brainstorm topics, so where to look for ideas, how to get your clients to tell you exactly what they want to hear about, how to go to your closest competitors and steal ideas from them without copying anything, and all those kind of ideas. And so, and then from there, we go into how to actually fill out your editorial calendar in a way that makes sense, how to come up with that strategy I'm talking about so that when you see your sales cycles, you can easily work backwards and make sure that the content you're producing really is leading people down that path to sales. And then finally, what kind of content sells? How do you sell with a blog post when you're not actually sticking a buy now button in there? So I go through all of that information in my Blogstorm course. There's a link underneath the video here. If you want to just hop over to the sales page, it opens up separately, but I don't want to spend a huge ton of time on it. I just want to throw it out there because it really is a natural extension of what I'm teaching here. And so if you feel like you need some more help, if you feel like you need some more information, it's a great way to keep going and really get a little deeper into content marketing strategy with this editorial calendar template in mind. So this was one of my star pupils a couple of years ago, Mariah Dolan, and I just loved what she said because she said she felt like she had her business down. She was a nutritionist and a fitness coach, but she was super overwhelmed with her content and felt like she didn't have a means to get started or get organized, and she was just paralyzed because of it. And so Blogstorm was really a perfect fit for her, and she used it to actually plan her video blogging. She does mostly video blogging, and she even used it to set up a production schedule with her husband, who's her videographer, so that he would know, she would batch record some videos, and then he would edit them and produce them, and he would know based on their editorial calendar which one he should work on next and which one was ready to go, because it was all organized and laid out in a really great fashion. And they could tell, okay, we're working towards this launch, or we're talking about this subject, or this is where we need to go. And it was a great tool for her and her team. And I was so impressed with the progress she made from feeling totally paralyzed to doing this great video blog that's really boosted her business in a big way. So that's why I throw her in here, because she's just such a great example of what you can do. All right, so just to recap very quickly, we talked about you have to know your who you're talking to. You have to know what you're going to talk about. But more importantly, you have to know when you're going to give that message, because you want to work backwards from your sales cycle or a holiday or whatever it might be so that your content is really supporting your message. You have to know where you're going to promote it. And most of all, you have to know why you're doing it in the first place. So, I'm going to switch back over here to video for a second. And Jess, if there are any questions you have or questions that anybody has thrown in the chat box, I am happy to answer them now.
Yeah, I have a question actually from Caroline, and I've got one or two of my own as well, but I'll give Caroline's
Awesome.
first. So Caroline's asking whether the actual text of your tweet goes in the template. I think she means whether you're actually writing the copy for that and popping it into your template to use for later, or how do you get that part started?
Sure. So yes, actually, when I'm doing it, I would write the actual text of the tweet. You might have multiple tweets depending on how often you share it, but I absolutely would go ahead and write the text ahead of time, especially if you're working with somebody else. That way they can just copy and paste it and it's ready to go. Or if you're working with a social media scheduler, like like Edgar or Hootsuite or whatever tool you choose to use. But it's really just, it depends on your own process. So if it's helpful for you to write the whole text in there, awesome. If not, if you want to just write something in there that's like, be sure to talk about blah, 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 or use this pull quote. I like to use quotes from my blog posts a lot. So sometimes I'll just copy and paste a quote in there that I want to make sure I use when I'm promoting it. Whatever works for you. The beauty of this template is that it's very adaptable, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, cool. Caroline, just let us know in the chat if that helped, and if anyone else has any more questions, just pop them in. I'm going to ask one, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
I actually put out my very first video blog this morning and never done that before. And other mediums. So my question would be, how do you decide or plan out the mediums that you're going to use in your blog content and ensure that you have a good mix?
Totally. That's a great question. So I would actually use one of those Y columns for that, or create a new one. Maybe you just call it medium. But that way you can make sure you're hitting them regularly or hitting a good mix like you were talking about. So, I'm not sure there's really a formula in terms of, how often should I do a video blog versus text. That's something you kind of have to feel out with your own audience and see what works best both for your process and what people like to see the most from you. But yeah, I think that can definitely be included in your calendar so that you can see, okay, I'm going to do a video once a month, so I know I have to shoot that and produce it. That might have different steps or take different time or require different team members depending on how you work. So I think that's a really great thing, actually, to include in your calendar. One thing I didn't mention in the training is that I also include basically anything I have to write. So if I'm doing a guest post, if I need to do an email out that's different from my normal newsletter to promote something, I'll put that in my calendar as well, usually in a different color so that it stands out so that I don't forget. Because a lot of times what I'm using my calendar for is also like time management, because I know, if I have to write a blog post and an email, I need to schedule my time that week differently than if I only have a blog post, if that makes sense. So I really do rely on it to help me plan my time as well. And so that goes back to the video. I'm assuming for me, just, doing my hair and stuff would take more time to do video than it does for a blog post. So I would need to do that.
That's awesome. Thanks. Let's see. I don't have any more questions from the audience right now, so I'll just monopolize the conversation for just a couple more minutes.
No, that's cool.
So can you talk a little bit more on, creating this? Like, I find some people find plans restrictive, and I find this with my business plan clients as well. They say, I've got a plan for it. Well, now I have to follow it, even though life happened, things change and that kind of thing. And I always say, no, and I can teach my way of being able to adapt a business plan to help you maintain that flexibility. So how would you apply that to blog planning? Like, how do you structure your content calendar so that you can easily adjust for like crazy shit that happens or like current events or whatever it is?
Yeah, totally. So the really nice thing about having an Excel is copy and paste, right? You can cut it, paste it, move it down, whatever you want to do. So that's really nice. But the other thing to remember is that this is just a plan. It's not set in stone. Shit happens, things change, and you need to be flexible. But I find that having the plan gives me the option to be flexible instead of sitting there going, oh my God, what am I going to write about this month? So, but to the other part, you talked about current events and things like that. I have had a couple of clients in the past. So I had one client in particular. She was a financial planner, financial coach. And what she liked to do on her blog was take something from the news that week and spin it with a financial angle. And so she was like, how do I make a calendar work for me when I have to wait and see what's going on before I can write about it? And so what I told her was she could still plan out her calendar with her why, with that AIDA formula or whatever it might be that she was planning, and then choose her topics to fit the plan. So what I mean by that is, like, if she knew she was launching a product in a couple of weeks, and so she wanted to write a post that would generate desire, make people desire that product, she could have it already in her calendar that she needed a desire post on this date. And then that week rolls around, all she has to do is look at what's going on in the world and say, great, I want to write about this, and I'm going to spin it so that it creates desire for my product, right? So she can write about any topic as long as she can spin it a little and tie it back to creating desire for her product, which was part of her launch sequence. So I think that's kind of how I would recommend doing that if you like to sort of blog by the seat of your pants. You still kind of have that strategy in place. You have that plan for the broader why, what you need to talk about. Maybe it's, I need to get a lot of opt-ins this week. So that means I need to create something that people want to opt in for. So then you just, for me, I like to create a lot of worksheets, which I call content upgrades. So I'll write a how-to post and then have a worksheet that you can download that's specific to that post. And that always gets me a lot of opt-ins. So if for 1 week I had just planned that all I had planned was I need opt-ins, then I would know, okay, I need to think about something I can use to write a worksheet, because that's what people like to download from me. Hope that makes sense, Jessica.
Awesome, thanks. I have a couple questions from Cher, and I'm going to sort of combine them because they're sort of related. So her first question was, do you use a regular calendar, like a Google Calendar, as in conjunction with this to sort of schedule things and make sure you remember to do stuff? Actually, I'll keep it as separate questions. Okay, so that one first.
That's part one. Okay. So yes, the answer is yes. I have about, like I said, I'm a little type A, so I have multiple calendars going at any one point so that I don't forget anything. I don't put my content in my calendar. But like, for example, so I'm running this webinar with Jessica, I needed to send out emails before this. So that would be in my calendar because that's unusual and weird. I know I'm going to write, that would be in my Google Calendar, I know I'm going to write a blog post every week, so I don't put that in my Google Calendar. But when there's something extra, unusual, a guest post, whatever it is, I'll put that deadline in my Google Calendar so that it pops up and reminds me and I don't forget. I like to use a tool called CoSchedule, and it's a plugin for WordPress that goes in your WordPress blog, and it will show you your scheduled blog posts in a visual calendar format. So like in a monthly calendar format, and it will also show you your tweets, your Facebook updates. So that's what my VA and I use to schedule my social media, because you can do it straight from WordPress, and I really love being able to see really visually in a calendar format where all those things are. So like I said, I have multiple calendars because I'm a little crazy, but that's how it works for me.
That's cool. So you said it was called CoSchedule?
It's C-O schedule. And if you go to coschedule.com, it has a small fee per month, but I find it really worth it.
Okay, cool. So I just popped that link into the chat for everybody. And then the second part of Cher's question was when you do your planning. So is it something that you make sure you're doing right at the beginning of the year, or do you revisit this on an ongoing basis? Like, what do you do? Yeah,
so I usually recommend planning out at least a month and no more than 6 months. Personally, I usually do about a quarter, about 3 months at a time, just because I like having that big picture view of what I'm planning and what I'm doing. Some people, it depends on how often you post. If you only post once a month, then you probably need to plan out maybe 6 months, because that would only be 6 blog posts. But if you post once a week, like I do, I would say the minimum to plan would be a month, and the maximum would be 6 months, because you don't want to plan too far out. Stuff changes, So I just set a date with myself about once a quarter and take a couple of hours and work through this process and sort of look at where I am and where I'm going. I actually have a blog post about it. I can see if I can pull it up really quick. That was sort of a case study about how I plan, how I use my system to plan. So hold on, let me find that link for you and I'll pop it in there. But basically, that's what I do. I use it about once a quarter, and it's not coming up. Oh, here we go. No, it's not coming up in Google. I'll have to send it to y'all later. But if you search my blog, you can find it. But basically, I set it up about once a quarter, and I sit down and I brainstorm a bunch of ideas. I look at first, what are my sales cycles going to be? What am I promoting this quarter? Then I brainstorm a bunch of ideas, and then I just fill it in. And it usually takes me maybe an hour, maybe 2, depending on how much research I need to do. And then I'm good to go for 3 months, which is really awesome.
Very cool. Thank you. I think it's really helpful for people to know that there's some flexibility there. I think a lot of people feel they have to confine themselves into just deciding what they're going to do for the whole year and then never change it. So just know that planning is, it's an ongoing, it's an evolving process. And whether that's business planning, blog planning, or financial planning, or any other sort of planning you're doing in your life, it's just accepting that no matter how structured and amazing you make your plan, it's going to change anyways, but the process of doing it is so valuable and really helps you get organized.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better, because I always like to say, none of this is written in stone. It's all changeable. You're the boss. You get to change it if something changes. Even if you sit down at your blog writing time and you just don't want to write whatever your topic is about that week, that's okay. Don't do it. You're the boss. You change it up, whatever works for you. But having that plan means that when you don't know what to write about, when inspiration doesn't strike, when your muse doesn't visit you, you have something to fall back on. And that's what's really keeps you moving, and you avoid that panic. You avoid that blogger's block. Staring at the blank screen is pretty awful. So that's what we're trying to avoid. And also trying to avoid, when you wait for inspiration to strike every single time, your content isn't going to lead people to that action you want them to take, whatever that why is, right? Because you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing where it sticks. And that's really not a good strategy for anything except maybe spaghetti. So having that sort of plan really helps you focus and say, yeah, I'm going to lead them here. I'm going to tell them this. I'm going to bust this myth. I'm going to say, wouldn't it be great if you had this, this problem solved in your life? And then I'm going to solve it by offering my product.
Very cool. Well, I've invited any further questions. It doesn't look like we have any right now. So I've popped the link for Blogstorm into the chat a couple of times. So you see this kind of funny looking link with lots of characters in it. That's when you want to click. Also, it's squeezed between the video and the chat. So it says click here to learn more about choosing and planning content that sells. Just go there if you want to find out a little bit more about Blogstorm and how the program can help you organize your content calendar. I think this is something that I for sure need. So really appreciate the content you've shared today. Is there anything else, Lacy, that you want to tell the audience before we sign off?
No, I'm so excited that you guys joined us. Thank you for asking questions and participating. I really appreciate it. And I'm always available on Facebook to answer questions. So come find me over there if you have any additional questions. And Jessica, thank you so much for having me and inviting me to talk to your audience today. I really appreciate it.
All right, fantastic. Everyone have a great day.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.